Record. All right, so welcome to Heart Goals. We have some upcoming events, health screenings, wellness classes, and programs that we want you to take note of. So you're welcome to screenshot this slide, or you can be sure to go to wellness.ua.edu and sign up for the newsletter. And this newsletter will give you all of the latest information about screenings, classes, and programs. So I hope that's helpful to y'all, and we would love to see you participate. So a heart-centered approach to goal setting. We have another class where we talk about habit change. And in that class, we talk about habit change as it relates to goal setting. And we talk more about SMART goals and things of that nature. We also talk about kind of the traditional approach to goal setting. And so, yes, Miranda popped in the wellness.ua.edu subscribe link. Thanks, Miranda. And so today we're going to talk about a non-traditional approach to goal setting, where we think about using a HEART acronym and really a heart-centered approach. And so we'll talk about what that means. All right, so my name is Abby Horton, and I am a registered nurse. I'm a certified health and life coach, a well-being ambassador for the Honors College, and one of your wellness class educators. My contact information is abby.horton@ua.edu. And if you need to reach out or have a question, please feel free to do so. So our objectives for this class today, we're talking about the differences between HEART goals and SMART goals, exploring strategies for effective HEART goal setting, and to provide tools and resources for HEART goal setting. So I like to open most of my talks with this graphic about control what you can control. So the goal isn't to get rid of all of your negative thoughts and feelings. That's impossible. The goal is to change your response to them. And that's so important because we often talk about stress as if we shouldn't have stress. And reality is that if we are engaging, if we are showing up in our lives, we are going to have stress. That's just part of human nature. And so we don't want to worry about what we can't control, but we really want to focus on the things that we can. And that's usually our attitude and our effort. So you see in this image here, the things I can control, the things that you consume, the people that you follow, the people that you unfollow, what you eat, what you don't eat, how you react, the personal boundaries that you set, how you speak to yourself, your attitude, your actions, your behaviors. Those are the things that are within your control. And that's where you want to really focus your time and attention. I love the Venn diagram, things that matter and things that you can control. Where those overlap, that's really where you should focus your time and your attention and your effort, because that's going to be where you can really move forward on your goals. So a SMART goal, I'm sure most of you are familiar. SMART looks at specific, measurable, achievable, or sometimes we say attainable, realistic, and timely or time sensitive. And so when we think about setting our traditional goals, we think about having a specific goal that we can measure, that we know that we can reach, or that it seems, doable, that we can achieve it. It's a realistic goal and that we have a time period for that, a deadline of when we want to accomplish this goal by. And SMART goals can be really helpful. We use them in healthcare, we use them in nursing. We actually teach our students how to create SMART goals for their patients and patient outcomes. And I think that can be really helpful. But what I would really like to see us do is to use the SMART goal approach with the HEART goal approach that we're going to learn today to really be able to have more meaningful goals in our lives and to be able to focus our time and attention on what matters most. So this quote, heart-centered goals are goals you can't help but achieve. And the reason that you can't help but achieve them is because we are then, looking at our values, living from our purpose, and focusing on the things that are important to us, that are not just, goal-oriented or task-oriented, but truly are going to help us feel connected in our lives. And so setting the stage, why HEART matters. So the acronym HEART stands for Help Yourself, Empower Yourself, All Your People, Resources and Responsibilities, and then Trade. And so this is an acronym that was created by Whitney English, and she is an influencer on social media who has created several different planner lines. You may have heard of her original planner line, which was called Day Designer. And she sold that several years ago, and now that's a part of the Blue Sky company that sells their planners online and in Target retailers. Whitney English talks a lot about why heart goals matter. And so she originally developed that acronym for that planner company. And then she opened a new planner company and modified her heart acronym and has sold a lot of different products around that. And so this is not a commercial for Whitney English, but she has a ton of free resources, also paid resources. And I'm not affiliated, but I am a fan of her work because I think that she takes a traditional goal setting approach and really makes it more applicable to the everyday person. And so using her heart goal system, it really helps to create balanced goals that aren't just about, having business or career or what she calls trade goals, that makes it more personal. And so we're going to walk through some of her guidelines and then some of her products that may be able to help you with that. So help yourself, empower yourself, all your people, resources and responsibilities, trade and talent. So I'm not going to read this graphic to you, but I think it's a good overview of, helping yourself. Like, how can you best take care of your physical health? How can you best practice physical self-care? And what does that mean for you? Empower yourself. What are the things that your mind, your body, your heart, your soul needs to be successful, to feel that you have a meaningful purpose, that you feel that you're aligned with your values. All your people, your physical, mental, and emotional needs, focusing on your relationships, establishing good boundaries. Those are all important for all your people, and that will be your family, your neighbors, your colleagues, all of those people that you interact with in your life. And then resources and responsibilities, the things that you are really stewarding in your life. So your home management, your commitments and obligations outside of work and home. Maybe you're in an organization, or maybe you play a sport. Maybe you're in graduate school. Maybe your kids are in these kinds of things, or your loved ones. And then trade and talent. So again, this is going to be more related to your work goals. And one of the things that Whitney English says that, she feels is a deficit within the traditional SMART goal setting is that we really focus more on setting goals for work and career or trade and talent, and we don't invest that same level of goal setting in personal development in our personal lives, in our home lives. And so this is where she created this heart goals approach. So what I always want to start out with is, beyond focus on what you can control, is to think about taking action, because action builds momentum. And when you have momentum, you are really usually inspired by that action, that motivation, which leads to more action, which can lead to discipline. And so we often hear people say, how do you stay so motivated toward your goals? And really, motivation is not what you're wanting to aim for. It's taking purposeful action, and it's being able to show up consistently every day for your life, which then creates the discipline to continue that practice. So it's not just about, taking an action, getting a reward, or feeling motivated to do those things, but it's really that you take the action because you have a goal in mind, you build some momentum from that, you actually gain motivation, usually on the other side of that. And then those rewards develop the discipline because you know that it's important to continue on that path. And so I always tell people to just pick one thing and focus on that one thing. We talk about having priorities and we make that plural, but really a priority it's a misnomer if we have more than one. What is our priority in the moment? We can really only focus on one thing at a time. And a lot of times our overwhelm and our stress comes in when we feel like we have so much to do. And so I'm going to share some personal anecdotes, more than I typically would, because this presentation really allows for it. But for me today, if I'm just being, candid with you, I am approaching surgery in 2 weeks, and I have a lot to do, a lot of things that I need to accomplish. I have a long to-do list. It's sitting right beside me right here on my desk. And because I'm having surgery, I do have some symptoms and some things going on with that. I've woken up today and have just not felt great. Just don't feel quite like myself. and just have been having some pain, and then thinking through a lot of the things that have deadlines that are approaching, a lot of the things that I need to accomplish in the next 2 weeks, personally and professionally, to go into this surgery feeling like I have, a good headspace and that I have everything taken care of because that's my personality. It can be a little overwhelming and stressful. And so this morning I had to think about, okay, what's important now? That's an acronym that we use a lot. Win. So, how do I win in this moment? What's important now? And so, just taking it literally this morning, hour by hour, and having to talk myself through. So, I went to, my resources that I have on hand and thought, okay, how do I change my perspective? I can't necessarily take away the pain. I can't change the surgery date, and I can't change a lot of the to-dos that I have, on my plate that I need to get accomplished. But how can I reframe some of this, and how can I reset? And it's not always easy. So I'm being a little more vulnerable in sharing this than typically I would. But I think it's important to know that even when we know what to do, even when we know what is necessary to accomplish, it doesn't mean that it isn't hard. And I still have hard moments. And so today is just one of those days. And I really hope that by me sharing that, I hope that that helps someone on the call. Even if it only helps one person, that will be well worth it. Because sometimes we just need someone else to say, "I see you, I hear you, I understand, and I'm kind of in the same spot." So if that's you, just know that I am in sympathy with you and empathy with you today on that. So some actionable steps that you can try. Sometimes it means that you just have to get up. So when I was feeling a little overwhelmed this morning, I just got up from my desk and I went and refilled my water. I wanted to make sure that I had a full, cup of water before I started the presentation today. And so I just took a quick lap around the building, got my water refilled, and came back to sit down. And I felt better after doing that. So sometimes it just means that we move our body. Sleep is foundational to health. We have a class called Wellness Basics where we talk about the 5 to thrive. And sleep is really foundational, although it's really difficult for us to control. We have a lot more autonomy and control over how much water we consume. We have less autonomy and control over how well we sleep. We can set the stage for good sleep. We can have good sleep hygiene. But ultimately, the quality of our sleep and even sometimes the hours of sleep that we get aren't completely within our control. The water is a better example of we have a lot of control over that. Setting healthy boundaries, having meaningful connections. There have been some longitudinal studies that looked at over years and years, decades of research done at Harvard University, that the key to happiness has really been meaningful connections. It wasn't some of the things that we pursue. It wasn't professional success. It wasn't even income. It wasn't those types of things. It wasn't our awards or honors or accolades. It was really meaningful connections and relationships with people that determined our ultimate happiness over decades. And so I'm going to share some things at the end of the presentation. Play, hobbies, and fun, I think, is so important. I'm going to share a resource at the end of the talk with you that I'm only a couple of chapters in, and typically I don't recommend a book or a resource until I've completed it. But it was so impactful for me this past week when I started to dive deeper into this book that I think it's worth recommending to you. And then walking, I gave an example of that. Where walking can really reset our stress response and complete the stress cycle because our body is primed for fight or flight. Either we're going to face and fight the stressor, or we're going to flee. We're going to run away from that stressor. But we also have the freeze response. And so our bodies are designed to do something. And sometimes we just get stuck and we don't know what to do. Well, what does this have to do with actions and goal setting? Well, really, if we can't take actionable steps to create this momentum that we're looking for in our goals, or if we only have goals around our professional life, that can sometimes lead to burnout. It can lead to, role confusion where we are so focused on one aspect of our life that we're not giving the other areas of our life enough attention. And so when we think about the wellness wheel, we think about the different domains. There's usually about 8 domains that we think of, environment, social, relationships, recreation, which would be the play, hobbies, and fun. There are different aspects of that. And of course, we typically look at the professional category, and that takes up a lot of our time because that's going to be, 40 hours designated a week. That's going to be less flexible than these other things like meaningful relationships and connections and play and fun and recreation. And so we have to even be more intentional and more heart centered in those goals because those are the things that feel like we can let those go when everything else has to get done on our plate. And so I'm living that right now with y'all, and I hope that this is helpful. So, with the H, the help yourself, in Whitney English's book, where she talks about heart goals, I'm going to share that resource at the end of the presentation. She's also developed a pad that has tear off sheets where you can jot these down, every day or every week of what your goals are. And these are the categories that she's listed. And then I've done a few Abby add-ons. And so she asks you to really track your sleep goals, your water goals, your nutrition goals, and your movement goals. And then my 5 to Thrive that I teach for Wellness Basics for UA, I actually talk about mindfulness and meditation. So I would say that that would be a good add-on for you to think about mindfulness, meditation, giving your brain a break. And I think we all need to do that more often. So I want you to think about what would you add on to this list in terms of being able to help yourself. Is there something that you feel like is missing? And if you think that there's something missing, or if there's something that you would like to add on for your personal use, I would love to see you pop that in the chat. So in what ways can you help yourself? And I love that these mirror the wellness basics. Sleep, water, nutrition, movement, then maybe some mindfulness or meditation. What would you add? Pop that in the chat. And then empower yourself. How will I connect with my emotions? How will I find encouragement? How will I educate myself? And then my add-on here is how will I equip myself? And so how are you going to connect with your emotions when you're feeling stressed, when you're feeling overwhelmed, when you're feeling like you're not sure what next steps you should take to accomplish your goals? How are you going to connect with your emotions? I know for the most part, we typically like to avoid emotions, and we sometimes will say, oh, I'm so sorry for crying. I'm so sorry for, this emotion, or, we'll even say, I don't know why I'm crying or why I'm getting emotional about this. But really, emotions are good guideposts for us to know where we are on our journey and just how we are in our day. How are we going to find encouragement? To me, it's less about finding encouragement and more about creating encouragement for yourselves. I know sometimes it's easy to see people with large friend groups who have a lot of support and social networking there, and to say, oh, well, I wish I had that, or I wish that I had this friendship, or I wish I had someone to encourage me. And there have been moments in my life where I felt that, especially, feeling isolated with young children when I was a new mom. That could be very isolating at times. And so I had to create my own encouragement. So I have different things on my phone set up to send me encouragement. And so, while I wish that it was a friend texting me that encouragement sometimes, and sometimes it is, we have to make sure that we're not waiting on external, factors and influences, and that we really set ourselves up for success. And so I have a motivation app that will message me every morning at 9 a.m. and it has an inspirational quote. I have some other apps and things that send me scripture or other forms of encouragement throughout the day and reminders, because I think that that's really important that we set that up for ourselves. And that may look different for you. That may be something that, you want to work through. Maybe it's positive affirmations. There's apps that can set those up as well. And I think that's an important, component to what we're doing here. How are you going to educate yourself? I see some folks putting things in the chat. Great. I'm so glad. Yes, real notes are also helpful too. I think that's fun. How will I educate myself? So this is really about personal development. So how am I going to intentionally educate myself beyond maybe the degrees that you have, maybe beyond the in-services and workshops that you have? A lot of times our education comes from our professional standpoint, but is there something that you want to be able to educate yourself on outside of that? So things like master class. The only reason I'm giving y'all really specific examples is I think that's what's most helpful. That's what I find most helpful. We can say, oh, find encouragement or oh, educate yourself. But I think sometimes we just need something practical. Not that you always will use what I use, but it might trigger a thought, oh, I don't want to do that, but I could do this thing. And so one thing that my husband and I are doing together is we're watching a master class on how to garden. That's not something that I am particularly interested in, but I think it's a good life skill to understand gardening and how all of that works and why sometimes my plants don't stay alive longer than, a few weeks. And so I don't have a green thumb, but I've already learned some really interesting things about how to garden and how to plant. And some of the common things that we just kind of pick up as we go through life, why some of those things work and some don't. And so I'm not saying that you have to buy something or do something. There's a lot of free resources out there. But that's just one way that I'm choosing to educate myself. I don't need to know about gardening, but I think it's important. And it's something that I'm supporting my spouse in and that we're going to teach our kids. And it's just something to learn and to have that curiosity. And I think that's so important to feeling empowered, is to feel that you have control over what you learn and how you're curious. And then for me, how will I equip myself? And so, there are seasons of life where we're going to go through challenges and we're going to feel ill-equipped to handle those. We're going to feel like we need to be able, to close the gap and where we have to, get from one point to another. Maybe we don't feel like we have the tools or resources or education. So what are the things that we're going to do to equip ourselves? In the fall, I was feeling like, because I was moving into some new leadership positions, that I needed some mentorship. And so I think it's so important that we serve as mentors, but that also that we have mentors in our lives. And so for me, I reached out and joined a mentorship program and was coached for 6 weeks by a leadership mentor. And that was really helpful to me because I have had mentorship in the past, but I'm in a different season of my career and life. And that was helpful for me to have a different perspective and also to do some self-reflection. So how do you think that you want to equip yourself? And we will pop the slides in the chat at the end. And so y'all can take these and use these to actually write these down yourselves and think about how you want to practically approach this. All right, so in the HEART acronym, all your people, one thing you're going to say no to. Probably a lot of us have more than one thing. I'm raising my hand. I have more than one thing that I need to say no to right now. One person I'll reach out to. So I have a list of a few folks that I need to reach out to this week, not because I need anything from them or that they need anything from me, but just that they are people who are important to me and I want to connect with them. So yesterday, my childhood best friend reached out. We have lived in the same town since we were born. And, we rarely see each other except at, major life events. We are both very, very busy and, have a lot on our plates. And so we don't see each other very often, which is something that I have really wanted to change. In the last few months, I've had some, experiences that have made me realize how important life is to embrace and to live and not just be so focused on goals. And so I texted her yesterday a Valentine's Day a little meme that I created using a free app and just said, "Happy day, love you, friend." And then she messaged back, and that felt so good. And so I have some other people that I want to reach out to. Those meaningful connections, you're in your personal life and in your professional life. I went to a conference last week that was called Creating Healthy Work Environments. It was really impactful and powerful, and a good reminder of some things that we already knew, and some good information, some new information on how we can create meaningful connections and meaningful work environments. And one of the speakers talked about how important it is to, when you need something, to just go reach out to the person that you need something from rather than always defaulting to sending an email. And so the speaker gave an example of at least once a day, this leader will actually go and talk to someone either on the phone or go see them in their office instead of sending an email. And I know that's not always practical to do. It may not always be feasible to do that, but think about, is there, an opportunity in your day to go and see someone face to face and ask for something or follow up with that person versus just emailing them or, calling them. Although I think calling is a good option too. And then is there a person, this is the Abby add-on, is there a person that I need to have one-to-one time with? And so as I'm approaching surgery, I'm looking at, my children and my husband. I had one-to-one time with him last week, and that was really helpful. And this week, I'm focusing on having some one-on-one time with my kids before my upcoming surgery, because, they need that engagement as much as I do. When you have a life event, sometimes you don't think about how that's impacting the people who love you and the people who are in your life. And so is there someone that you want to have one-to-one time with this week? And let me make a caveat with this because my phone is always sitting very close to me. So it's always within reach. And I am someone that, I'm trying to be mindful of my consumption and my phone usage, and how important it is for you to be able to have one-on-one time with your friends and loved ones and colleagues without your phone being a distraction. That's something that I have not perfected whatsoever, but that's something that's important to me because so often my need to feel like I am being, reachable or that I'm being productive has me reaching for my phone too much. And I don't want that to be what my kids remember. So resources and responsibilities, think about income and budget. You'll see on Whitney English's handout that she has this, listed a little differently, but I adapted it. What bills do I have coming in? What debt do I want to reduce? How do I want to give back and invest? And then I added this on what do I want to steward more intentionally? And so I think this is important. This really looks more at financial, considerations from Whitney's perspective. For me, I would think more about resources and responsibilities in terms of, classes I'm taking, internships I'm looking at, personal development, things in my home life, things at work. Is my environment conducive to what I'm doing, parenting or housekeeping or, in my work environment, is it conducive to what I'm doing in my work? And so I think that this is something that you could use as a starting point, and then you could adapt it for your own needs. And our responsibilities, I think sometimes that we think about roles and responsibilities and we equate that all as a responsibility. But what I want to say about responsibilities is that sometimes we also think of responsibilities not just obligations, but as blame or as fault, like, oh, who's responsible for this in that way. And so responsibilities is one of those loaded words that you really have to think about and consider carefully. But I love Dr. Daniel Amen. He is a clinical psychologist and has a large social media presence. He does a lot of great work around mental health and is really pioneering some of the new technologies and approaches to mental health care. And he talks about responsibility and breaks the word apart and says it's your response and your ability. It's your ability to respond to things that are going on in your life. And so don't just think about, responsibilities as what are my commitments and obligations, although that's important, but also think about where you need to take more action on how we respond to things. And that's certainly going to be something that we give ourselves grace for because our, challenges in life, the seasons of life that we go through are going to be really something that always changes. And yes, I will type it in the chat. Daniel Amen. Okay. And I'll go back to the chat. I know there's some things I need to address in there. Thank y'all for being so interactive. So trade, what can I do today to maximize progress on work tomorrow? What is a best yes? That's one that I added on. And then what is a definite no? And so I want to encourage you to remember your best yes. There's a book by Lisa Turkers that talks about the best yes. And I read it several years ago. It's worth rereading, I think, as a reminder to me. I know I need to reevaluate this often, but what is a best yes? Meaning, what am I willing to say yes to in the moment that may cause me to say no later? So for me, when I was working on my graduate school work, it was setting boundaries around when I did my graduate school work. So if I had to work all weekend to get a big project turned in for my graduate school work while I was still parenting and while I was still working full time, then I would make an intention for the next weekend that I would be really focused on my family, that I wouldn't take that time to do a lot of grading. or getting caught up on work, but that I would do something intentional and fun. If there had been a lot of weekends or, a series of weeks where I was really busy and over, committed or something like that and working late, then I would probably make it something that was a little more fun. We would go out for pizza versus just having pizza night at home, or every so often we would take the kids to the zoo when they were younger, as a treat, like, in saying, mom's been working a lot on the weekends and y'all have really helped out at home. Let's go for a fun day at the zoo. And then, we'll get pizza after. And so those are some things that I think really are helpful to think about of best yeses. Whether you have kids at home, or maybe you're an empty nester, or maybe you're single, whatever your situation is, you can take this information and apply it to your own life and see where best yes is. Because if you say a best yes and you're single, you're saying no to time at home with yourself. You're saying no to time with friends and loved ones. You're saying no maybe to your pet at home. And so I think it's important that we value our off time, and that we see that, off time and free time doesn't mean that we're always available. And so it's important that we block that time, because resting is productive. And so I think it's important that we consider. So what is a definite no? A definite no, those are going to be the things that are not moving you toward your values and your goals. They're not helping you get to the heart of what's important to you. And so I think when we look at, our profession, our trade, our talent, where do we want to have some concrete goals? And then where do we have some aspirational goals? Those yeses and nos are going to help us get there. Right. So next steps, when we start clearly defining our heart goals, we can create SMART goals that then support those. And so when we know what we value, when we know what's important to us, when we know what isn't important to us, we can more easily approach goal setting, because we realize that, this may be one commitment, one project, one goal, one meeting, one thing that we've committed to. But is that taking away time from something that would be more beneficial, that's going to get more at the heart goals and SMART goals that we've set for ourselves? And I think once we understand that, once we know what we value, once we know what's important to us, then we can rinse, repeat, and reevaluate as often as we need to. And we do need to redo that often, because what worked for us last year, what worked for me last January, is not what works for me now. A year ago, I had no idea that I'd be coming up upon this surgery, or that some of the things that have occurred, good and not so good, over the last year would have me in a very different spot in January and February of 2023. And so I think it's so important that we're constantly self-reflecting and thinking about where we need to make minor changes, where we need to make some major changes to get back on track with what's important. So we have to be strategic, and this is something that's traditional goal setting, oriented, but long-term goals, a lot of times we stop with the long-term goal. We stop, thinking about the short term and the daily. So we might say, because we love football here, and we just had the Super Bowl, we might say that we want to win a national championship, or we might say that we want to win the Super Bowl. But really, the success in our plan and in Coach Saban's process is that we have that long-term goal of we want to win the championship, or we want to win the Super Bowl. But what are we going to be doing on a quarterly, monthly, weekly, and then even daily basis that's going to get us toward those goals? And so daily routines then need to be the things that are going to move it forward for us. So that's when we have daily football practice, because we can't just do, a weekly football practice or a monthly football practice and then show up to the championship game or show up to the Super Bowl. And we know that, and that sounds silly to use that as an example, because we're like, of course we wouldn't do that. But we often do that when we think about our long-term goals. We will kind of just show up on a monthly, weekly basis, and then hope that when we get to that goal time, that we're able to move it forward. Another example would be running a marathon. If you've never walked a 5K, or you've never participated in a run, you're probably going to have some challenges if you decide that you're going to suddenly sign up for a marathon, but you've never done the other steps to prepare you for that. And so that's really what breaking down, starting with your long-term goal, then looking at on a quarterly, monthly, weekly basis, what should I be doing? What would be helpful to get to this goal? And then daily, what do I need to be doing daily? So another example would be playing the piano. If you want to play the piano or any other musical instrument, then likely at least most days you would want to be practicing your piano for 30 minutes to an hour or probably longer. Your piano teacher would probably tell you a little longer. And so you have to be strategic about those things. It also means that you have to be mindful of what your days will allow. When I worked 3 12-hour shifts in a row and I had young children, while I had goals to, learn Spanish more fluently or to learn to play the piano, it just wasn't realistic with all of the responsibilities that I had as a parent and then my responsibilities as a nurse working 12 hours and then, having commute and, extra time to transition just wasn't feasible for me to build in 30 minutes to an hour in that season of life. It's much more doable now if I wanted to accomplish those goals. So just because you say no now doesn't mean it can't be a yes later. And then a reminder to really allow yourself to be fully human. This is one that I think it's so important when we say to give ourselves grace. It's to know that we're not robotic, that we cannot run 24/7, 365, and have consistent productivity like a machine or a robot. And I think sometimes we expect that of ourselves. I know that I expect that of myself sometimes. And inevitably, something will happen, like a day like today for me. And I remember how human I truly am. I feel human today. And I joke about that because I think humor is important. But in all seriousness, we have to have some levity. We have to have a break. We have to let ourselves be fully human. Heart goals is about using a system that works for you and works for your family, your loved ones, your resources, your strengths. So do what works for you. I always tell people to take what resonates with you, implement those things, and then just be curious about how other people approach situations or challenges or problems, because oftentimes we can learn from that. What works today in this season may not work in the future, and that's okay because we're going to do the rinse, repeat, and reevaluate so that we can get to where we want to be in the future. And then I always talk about golden nuggets. Dr. Becky Atkinson teaches here in the College of Education in the graduate school. She was one of my professors, and she gave us a rock that she had spray painted with gold spray paint from her driveway. And it was a really pivotal moment for me. And she was talking about the importance of taking away lessons from the people that you meet. And so she said that she was giving us a literal and figurative golden nugget in one of our classes. And so I took that away. I have that golden nugget sitting on my desk at home. And so this is the golden nugget that I will share with you. So the goal is often not the point, it's really the journey. And it's the process of working toward the goal that matters most. It's who you become on your way to the goal. And that it's important to really embrace the journey. So we see in this image here, it's not that we're reaching this target, which is what traditional goal setting has us do, but it's really that it's a cycle, that we're constantly learning, that we're constantly growing, that we're constantly moving forward. And sometimes it looks like we're going in a never-ending circle, but it may be that we're actually spiraling upward, that we're working toward a better version of ourselves. And so a lot of times personal development and positive psychology will tell you to kind of show up as your highest self. And we think, what does that mean? And it means, what's the best version of yourself that you can imagine? How would that person show up today? What would they do if they were having an off day? What would they do if they're having a painful day? What would they do if they were, approached about, a difficult situation or a difficult conversation? How would they show up in that way? And I say difficult, but you could say challenging. And so really embrace the journey and think about how you want to move forward with next steps. So this is a poem that I pulled because I think it really signifies and symbolizes some of the work that we do with heart goals. I've never included a poem in a class before, but I'm going to read it to you. one of the things that I learned in my leadership coaching, something that came out of that for me in the fall, was to really examine how much I lead with my head and how much I lead with my heart. And so I would ask that of y'all today. Do you make more of those heart, intuition, gut-based decisions, or do you typically get a little more cerebral and think about things from, a practical facts only kind of head, brain mentality? And so for me, I think this is true of most of us in higher education, regardless of our role, is that we've really been trained to fall back on our education, our experience, our brain. And that probably leads most of our decisions. And that's difficult to switch off when we go home. And so I want y'all to think about that and how you might make a change in your life if you think it's warranted. So, oh, this heart of mine, so stubborn, so soft, as gentle as the summer breeze, as fierce as the ocean waves. This heart inside me feels everything. It knows euphoric joy and profound grief. It feels sweeping love and shattering pain. And when my mind wants to run and hide from the hard parts of living, my heart whispers, no, stay. So I stay and I breathe and I keep my feet on the ground and I feel it all because my heart knows that the only way out is through. And the only way to truly live is to feel. And this heart, it finds so much to live for. It loves good food and genuine connection. It beats for late night conversations about where we come from and the infinite nature of our souls. It loves to see and to be seen, to feel and be felt, to listen and to speak. This heart of mine dreams, it wishes, and oh, how it believes. It believes in magic and possibilities and what my eyes can't see and my mind can't perceive. It nudges me forward when I'm afraid. It tells me to trust, to lean in, to let go. This heart of mine has endured so much sorrow, so much pain, but still it grows softer. Still it opens wider. Still it loves deeper. And I know that when I'm looking for guidance, for answers, for a sign, I can start right where I am, here in my heart. That's where I find freedom. That's where I find understanding. That's where I find myself. And so I think as you start to approach goal setting, it's so important that you listen to your inner wisdom. We are in a society and in a culture where we often look outside of ourselves for help and support. And I think that's great. And there are times where we need that external support. I know I have utilized that in my own life, where I needed a friend or a leadership coach or a counselor or a mentor. And I think that is necessary and needed, especially if you're having challenges with mental health or physical health. You're going to need a medical professional to walk alongside of you. But in addition to that, I think it's so important to turn inward and to think about your own wisdom and to access that. And that's something that I know I really am working toward this year is what do I know in my own wisdom to be true about this situation? Because no matter whether it's your parents or maybe a spouse or partner or children, no one has walked through your entire life with you, inside of you, feeling what you feel in your body, feeling and thinking what you feel in your brain. There's just no way for someone to know you better than you know yourself. And so I think developing that self-trust and calling on that inner wisdom is so important when you're thinking about heart goals, because it does ask you the hard questions of, what do I live for? What do I care for? What do I value? How do I want to show up? All right, we're going to move into resources, but before we do that, I'm going to look at your comments. Okay, Brittany asked if I'm willing to give this during a lunch and learn. Yes, Brittany, I'm happy to do that for any department on campus and for any of the talks that I have, more than happy to. And y'all are also welcome to share the videos that I have with your family and friends and networks. They convert to YouTube videos. And Miranda is on the call today. She does a lot of the behind the scenes, but they go to our wellness.ua.edu webpage and you can go to archived talks. And you're welcome to access all of those archived talks and share those out. But absolutely happy to do a presentation for anyone. So Douglas said something about his grandmother, about how her relationships really fed her heart. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. Oh, thank y'all so much. I'm glad that y'all enjoyed the poem. That is a new addition, so I'm glad y'all enjoyed that. Taking a little bit of a risk to share poetry and to read that out loud for y'all. But I think it's an important thing to take those opportunities to share from the heart. And I certainly am doing that today. So I hope it helps you. And so reflection prompts that I think will move you forward in terms of figuring out what's important and where you want to make some changes. So, think about this. If this was your last year, what would you do? So all of these prompts come from, looking at your inward perspective and giving yourself a finite timeline of knowing that, we sometimes procrastinate goals or things that we want to accomplish or just things that are important to us because we think we have all the time. And unfortunately, sometimes we have these moments in life where we realize that time is more precious. We've had a lot of recent tragedies in the news, worldwide, looking at the devastation in Turkey and looking at the train incident in Ohio and the loss of, some folks, with health challenges or, unexpected loss. That's just really been in my news feed this week and in the news when I've watched, looking at so many things that were unexpected and people who thought that they had all the time in the world. In the situation with my surgery, a diagnosis that was unexpected and feeling that way as well. And so I read recently, we can let those moments be curtain calls. We can let that be the thing that ends our drive and our motivation and our discipline, and we can get really discouraged. And it can be a curtain call for us, or we can let it be a wake-up call. And it really has to do with our mindset of whether we're going to choose to positively or neutrally reframe something, or whether we're going to let our brain's default kind of negative mindset around things take over. Our brains, I love our brain. Our brains are designed to protect us. So our brains really look for problems. Our brain looks for, things that make it unsafe for us, because if the brain can recognize things where it's unsafe or unstable or uncertain, then we can plan and prepare and avoid the thing that might endanger us. And so our brains are really always on survival mode, and we really have to overcome and really think through the natural instinct to feel more negative about something or to frame something more negatively. And if we know that, then we can start to take action on that. I talk more about that in the habit change class, and I use the reference of the coaching model. So if y'all are interested in that, you can go back to the January talk on habit change and you can get that information. So if this was your last year, what would you do? Who would you want to see? Where would you go? What would you regret? What would scare you? What would, kind of not scare you? What really scares you? What do you wish you had more time for? What's something that you wouldn't want to admit to yourself? What's something that you haven't told others, maybe haven't told loved ones? What would you really want to say to people? How would you really love and show up for people? Who would you forgive? Who would you want forgiveness from? I won't read all of these to y'all, but it's so important because we are creating our legacy every day that we show up. And part of our legacy are the goals and things that, what we say, move the needle forward. And we want to make sure that we are showing up in our professional life the way that we want, but also that we're giving equal time and attention to our personal life, and that we're looking at rest. There are different types of rest that are needed. It's not just sleep and naps and breaks, but we need spiritual rest. We need emotional rest. We need, sometimes relationship rest. So these questions help you figure out your priorities in life, what you really care about, what you can't live without. And I love this line here, like pretty much everything else in life, our priorities will change, and that will be reflected in our changing answers. And so this is not a one and done reflection, but really it's something that you want to maybe look at every year. Maybe on New Year's, you look at this list and you think, okay, how have my answers changed? And to celebrate those changes. So your responses can be really short or they can be long, but I think what's most important is that you pick up on the themes of what you keep coming back to over and over again. So the next stop, these are some resources: whitneyenglish.com, daydesigner.com. There are a lot of free printables and resources on both of those sites, as well as James Clear. I talk more about James Clear's approach to goal setting in the habit change class. But he has a lot of great resources and blog articles. He also has a 30-day habit change challenge, and he has a newsletter that he sends out every Thursday with some tips and some great quotes and some inspirational questions to ask. So that would be a next stop, in my opinion, for getting some more resources. And this is the book, A More Beautiful Life, that Whitney wrote about her heart method. So her 5-step approach to more, balanced goal setting and leading with the heart. And I think it's a really good read. This is the notepad that I mentioned that talks about the different categories of the heart method and the different little bullet points that you can address within your own life. And of course, you can see from there the ones that I added for each category. And I hope that you'll do the same. I hope you'll create your own category. And then these are some bundles that Whitney has. I've used some of her information and follow her on social media. She's just a great resource. A lot of her resources are free. And so I think that's always important. I always tell people to try to make things fun and free and easy, because that's what you'll stick to. And I'm a firm believer that you don't have to purchase anything to move forward on your goals. For me, when I started out in, personal development and was going back for health and life coach certification, I was, working. I had 5 school-age children at home. I still do. I was working a part-time job and full-time job, and I was in graduate school, and there was not a lot of wiggle room in the budget to buy a lot of things. And for a little while, I let that be an excuse of, oh, I can't do that because I don't have the budget for it, or I can't do that because I can't delegate anything on my list when I'm looking at what to say yes and no to. And so what I would encourage is, every time your brain tells you I can't do something because, and fill in the blank, I want you to think about, maybe write that down and think of a solution. So what is the solution to that problem? For one thing that I did, a common personal development tool is to say, oh, get up every day and make your bed. And if you make your bed first thing in the morning, you'll win the day. And if you've been on some of my other talks, I always reference that. I didn't do that for a while, and I would get really frustrated and say, oh, well, I can't, because I get up so early that I can't make my bed because my husband's still asleep. He hasn't gotten up for the day. And that's the life of a nurse. And so I'd say, well, that's just not going to work for me. And I would get discouraged and defeated about that. So my workaround was, I don't need him to make his side of the bed. I can get up every day and make my side of the bed. And that is still me being productive and moving forward on my goal. And that was so empowering, because I realized that my default was to find a reason why I couldn't do something. And so that one thing that seems pretty, silly and insignificant was really a shift for me of, where am I doing that in other areas of my life where I'm kind of defaulting to, well, I can't do that because it doesn't work perfectly based on what this person recommended. And for me, what that ended up actually spiraling is, then I noticed, after several months of doing that, waking up, making my bed with all of the lights out in the dark. It wasn't pretty, but it was done. Then I would get home several months later and notice that the other side of the bed had been made, and mine had kind of been tidied up and, kind of fixed for me. And it was because I set a habit, and I also role modeled that habit for my spouse, and he was willing to do that as well, because he noticed what a difference it made, and it totally changed my outlook on things. So these are some other printables and things. This is just one screenshot of a ton of resources that you can use. I think these work really well for starting to look at goal setting, because a lot of times we can't start to set new goals until we clear space for that. And so, again, these are completely free. You just put your email address in and it gets sent to you, and then you can download. But there are, scrolls and scrolls and scrolls of these free trackers that you can use, or a quick Google search will also bring more to you. And I think it's important that when you're goal setting, that you're not adding too much. So add 1 or 2 things that you want to focus on, and then make sure that you're taking care of your wellness basics first. Always start with the wellness basics, so sleep, nutrition, hydration, mindfulness, and purposeful movement. Because if you're not doing those 5 foundational things, then you're probably not going to have a lot of energy or space or bandwidth to add anything on, and you don't want to set yourself up to be frustrated. These are some archived webinars that we recommend that go hand in hand with this information that I'm sharing. Just a handful of the ones that are available on the wellness page. And so definitely feel free to check those out. And then we have some, great channels for y'all to connect with in terms of where to follow us. Ashley and Miranda do a wonderful job of maintaining all of our social media sites. And I'm going to move it to this slide so that you have our contact information here, if I can be of help. But some notes that I made when I was thinking this morning about, some things that I would add. There is a technique called the GLAD technique. And so I'm going to put that in the chat. We love acronyms in nursing, and I'm a personal fan of them anyway. But GLAD is gratitude, L is learning, A is accomplishment, and D is delighted. So if you're having a difficult time practicing gratitude or reflecting on things, or this feels a little too different from traditional goal setting, I would just recommend, if you take one thing away, it would be to practice this GLAD technique. Maybe at the end of the day, take a minute. This can be on a scrap sheet of paper. You can just think about it, or maybe you take a notes app on your phone out and you write this down quickly. But what's one thing that you're grateful for today? What's one thing that you learned today? And it doesn't have to be academic. What's one thing that you accomplished today? And again, it doesn't have to be newsworthy. It could just be that you completed this training, would be an example. And then what's one thing that delighted you today? What's one thing that brought you joy? So the book that I told you I was going to recommend, it's called The Fun Habit. And the tagline is The Fun Habit, Find Delight and Fix Unhappy. And it's by Dr. Mike Rucker. And I picked this up at the airport on the way back from my conference. And just the cover and the title really caught my attention. And I started reading it. I'm a couple of chapters in. And it really talks about the purpose of fun is actually, a healing component to our lives, and that we don't allow for fun once we become adults, because we think that the fun is really over and we only let ourselves have fun maybe on the weekend or maybe on an annual vacation. And so it talks about how we can instill fun in our everyday. And I hope that this will help reframe, what you feel like is fun. One of the speakers at the conference, Wendy Gates Corbett, talks about the energy of belonging and how to take care of yourself. And so she gave us a little mini version of some bubbles. And she asked us to think about how we want to instill fun in our everyday. So I'd heard her talk about that. And then when I saw the book, I said, okay, I've got to get the book. I need to learn more about having fun. And so I'm going to blow these bubbles for you. She had us in a conference full of 300 folks. We were all blowing bubbles, and it's just a reminder to have fun. So when she's stressed, she takes time to sit at home on her couch and blow mini bubbles. So we'll see if I can get them on screen. I'm not the best bubble blower. We'll see. It's not doing it, but you know what? That's okay. It's the thought that counts, and it's really being intentional about what we want to do to show up in our lives. And I always think that these are things that teach us, but sometimes when we have fun, we're going to have obstacles to it. Like these not blowing. I practiced before. Cassandra says, shake it up. I practiced before, and now they won't do it. I think they've lost their bubbleness. But what I will say to you is I want you, no matter what the obstacle, no matter risking embarrassment on a Zoom or, having to take some time away from your responsibilities and from your routines, to really reflect and think about the life that you want to create. I think you deserve it because you're a human, and you deserve it because, it's just innate. It's just an innate thing that we need to do. I'm so glad y'all love the reflection prompt activity. Thanks for linking the YouTube channel. Any other comments, questions, feedback? We would love to have it. I think I addressed everything in the chat. And I'm going to try to do these bubbles when I get off this call, and I bet they look great. So I encourage y'all to go and find something. It may not be bubbles, but it may be something else that you can do to infuse fun in your everyday. We are at 1 o'clock, and so if you need to go, please feel free. You've gotten your credit for attending, and we'll take care of that on the back end of things, and this video will be uploaded later. But if you have any questions, or if you have any feedback, anything that you would like to leave us, please feel free. We love your participation and your feedback. Thank y'all so much. Thanks for engaging. I'm glad y'all enjoyed it. Thank y'all so much. Well, if I can be of any help, please let me know. We are here for you at the Wellness Work Life office, and we hope y'all have a great rest of your day. Bye, guys.